You have dived into the world of Top Chef contestants. In this video, I will be diving into Ken Lee's participation on the show as one in Season 1 of the cooking reality TV series. Now, before we go any further, I want to clarify a few things. For one, these Top Chef dives will be treated within the context of Seasons 1 through 20. As such, seasons outside the one currently being focused on might be referenced and incorporated into these dives, but I will strive to make these dives accessible to everyone, regardless of if you watch the show or not. Second, given the nature of reality TV, things tend to be edited to inherit new context that is different from their original intent. While I may point out these discrepancies out of fairness, such as instances where commentary from separate sources, like this, are stringed together to form one thought, it's not going to be a goal of mine to point out every single one, especially if the integrity manages to stay unhinged afterward. While it is fun to point out how blatant the editors are with making it seem like what is on the screen is what really happened at that time, there's so many out there that it just gets exhausting to keep track. So some integrity on describing these people might be lost when doing these dives. Though I don't really blame them entirely for doing so, heck, I'm even selectively splicing things during these dives to form coherency. I will do my best to steer integrity back in when need be. Finally, it's important to note that these events took place eons ago, so obviously people have changed and grown as individuals since then. I'm not going to hold these old edited artifacts against how they act in real life eons later. Now, with that out of the way, let's begin. A dive into Ken Lee, a contestant that participated in Season 1 of Top Chef. Ken Lee walks into the competition as a 34-year-old Irish lad with years of Irish culinary training under his belt and a martial arts skill set on a separate belt. Slamming through the apartment in a rather disingenuous manner, he comments that the complex is akin to that for a housewife at fellow contestant Cynthia Sestito, to which she replies, At the quickfire challenge, Ken attempts to make it through the 30-minute requirement of attending to Hubert Keller's restaurant when 1 minute in, the unthinkable happens. He dips his finger into one of Hubert's sauces to taste it, disgracing all culinarians around the globe for doing such a heinous activity and bringing shame to everyone within the industry. At least that's what the goof-ass sounds in the background suggest.
Nobody puts a finger in the sauce and in the mouth. First we have to throw out the sauce, we have to start the whole thing over. A big mistake.
When Hubert gives out a closing remark at the end of the challenge, Ken makes it known that he knows nothing.
I didn't learn anything today, Chef, because I wasn't in your kitchen long enough.
The two bicker back and forth some more, to the point that Judge Tom Colicchio steps in and calls out Ken as rude and obnoxious, dragging everyone else in to be in support of him, to which contestant Tiffany Faison vocally agrees upon the most. Ken claims that he was just speaking his mind, and Tom gives him the benefit of the doubt that his vocal mindset is justifiable under the circumstances that his cooking abilities are top-notch. Shortly after the dismissed, Ken and Tiffany go at it again, this time on the subject matter of eating off the rack. Envious that Ken got to nom of some titties, Tiffany passionately let it be known that... Okay, the brawl between Ken and Tiffany did not revolve around titties, but rather was a continuation of Ken's shallowness toward the competition after he carelessly ate food off a rack without inquiring first. Somehow, they end up next to each other in the van, taking them back to the loft. And them, plus fellow contestant Leanne Wong, talk about their fun experiences that day. Essentially, despite not learning anything, Ken had just as much fun being there for 1 minute as Tiffany and Leanne did for 30. During the elimination challenge, Ken takes it upon himself to butcher a piece of meat he needs at the grocery store, because it's crucial to his concept of creating a signature dish that represents him. So much so that he's unfazed by an off-screen employee shouting at him to remove himself from the back of the meat counter. Ken, alongside contestants Dave Martin, Candice Kumai, Andrea Beeman, Miguel Morales, and Lisa Parks, are randomly selected by knife pulling to be the first ones to cook, where he unnervingly chants loudly through everyone's eardrums and chats with Tom over some intelligent conversation in the given time frame. He also cooks too. He serves a pan-seared Alaskan halibut to the judges and fellow peers, and his peers, including Tiffany, don't have anything positive to say about it. Cynthia ends up saying his dish was the worst out of those that were served to her, while Leanne pegs the imbalance between his attitude and culinary ability as apparent to her and her dining peers.
I think the attitude and the ego that we've been dealing with is not represented. There's no call for it.
When the tables turn and Ken becomes the diner, he praises Tiffany's dish and said that he would put it in his restaurant if he had one. On the contrary, Ken points out that Cynthia's dish was the worst for him. Despite this, Ken is the one in the bottom as the judges found his food to lack a sense of unity, and at judges' table, he admits that the dish wasn't up to the perfection he expected. Shortly after, he gets eliminated.
Ken, based on the dish you presented, we don't think you have what it takes to make it as a top chef. It was bland, and frankly, it just didn't taste good.
Please pack your knives and go.
Thank you very much.
As Ken packs his knives, realizing that he won't grace the title of top chef, he's still content with the way he acts, and that, as long as he's happy and healthy, regardless of wealth, that's all that matters. Ken returns back to the show for its reunion episode, and as the finalists wait for their colleagues to arrive, Tiffany predicts the order of the cast arriving will be from most cracked out to least.
Here he is. Ladies, gentlemen.
Not to say that it didn't work in her favor there, but the reality was that the cast came out the order they were booted. Aside from flinging his water bottle periodically, and a mention of being interviewed by Howard Stern on his show, which I find hard to believe given the play-by-play of Howard Stern on Mark Spriggan does not suggest any sort of interview happened, Ken's time is defined mainly with the debacle around his oozing finger, which subsequently leads to Leanne talking about how his dish in the Elimination Challenge was not the worst, despite going home.
I think Ken was sent home for a lot of different reasons, but I don't think his dish was the worst dish. There was sand in the kale in Andrea's dish, and I think there were a lot of other reasons why he was sent home.
As Ken tries to explain how ridiculous it was for him to go home over Andrea's nature plate with sand that was also in the bottom, Tom creates dialogue that Ken challenges, all leading to the usually pompously dazed and mild-mannered Stephen Esperinio to go off.
Whoa, question is,
Talking about sand on a dish and no sand on a dish.
Question for the
All right, which dish
what would
would
you
you
rather
eat?
eat?
Would you eat-
Sand or
Sand!
Come on, bro. I'd much rather eat sand than
Ken and Stephen later go at it some more when Stephen apologizes to Candace over the whole cookie cutter debacle that went down in a later episode, with Ken laughing as Stephen attempts to sincerely apologize to her.
Dude, stop laughing.
Have you got a problem with me, lad?
I do have a problem with
What's
you.
your
Shut the up.
Why are you looking there?
Shut the up.
What's your problem?
Shut up.
Guys, don't even start.
Okay.
Shut up.
I'm not doing that. I'm gonna laugh. You don't like me laughing?
Dude, you're a joke.
All is to say, when asked who would win, he supported Tiffany, citing his liking for her dish in the first episode as justification. As the first chef to be shown in the show's intro, where he's not even looking at the camera, and subsequently the first chef to get eliminated from the show, Ken's polarizing personality and bad food was troublesome for a cooking competition. Yet seeing how he had 20 years of restaurant experience, according to the show, the most out of anyone there at the time, and a disdainful mannerism that rubbed fellow peers the wrong way, and got host Katie Lee Joel's heart pumping out of fear, he was anything but troublesome for a TV cooking competition.
Who's going down?
Well, almost, given how he apparently suffered through night terrors.
He had night terrors where basically he would go crazy and jump off the bed and fall down on the floor, and we had to get the doctor. It was bad.
Strangely enough, he mentioned he had martial arts training during the competition, and while I'm not sure what kind it was, I would think such mental endurance would influence him to be a calmer person. But I guess the Irish culinary training of plate flipping, among other things, was a stronger influence. Sure sounded like it.
If the food is good, say it's good. If the food is crap, flip the plate.
Even still, the implication in his attitude being a factor in him going home is rather interesting. His food clearly wasn't good, but if the judging is supposed to be based on what is presented, and sand is presented on a plate, whereas an attitude is unable to be plated in the first place, it only makes Leanne's settlement at the reunion hold a valuable weight more so. And this is considering that she herself had been vocal about his skills not matching up to his attitude during the competition, only for her to recognize that it wasn't the worst dish that night. Tom also recognized something that night about Ken's dish in the elimination challenge. It may not have been that argumentative nature that got him a quick reputation, but rather, the opposite.
We got a sense, it was funny because there was some question as to whether or not he was the worst up there, and there were two others that were pretty bad. But I think the way we judged this, he had 20 years experience. The other two who were up there, one of them was a student, and the other one was a healthy food cook who was really, you know, these two were really putting their heart and soul into it, and this other guy with 20 years experience just really didn't care. And to me, I'd rather take the person who cares and who maybe has less experience, and then, you know, somebody who really just doesn't want to be there. So it was a pretty easy decision, I think. And we were given the latitude to make that kind of decision.
So maybe you can plate an attitude. People do say to put themselves on a plate after all. But if we're deliberately factoring attitude into this, were they really judging solely on the food this round? Either way, his ass got grassed, but what if it hadn't? Given his years of experience, had Ken made it through that round, he might have fared well and, dare I say, go from some unknown scallywag to a known success within the culinary world. What's even more considerable is that Cynthia bowed out of the show on the third episode to take care of her ailing dad, something that was looming in her mind throughout her time on the show. And Andrea, the most recent eliminee before Cynthia bounced, was brought back to fill in the vacant spot, where she was able to prove that she doesn't cook with sand. Had Cynthia bounced earlier, Ken could have proved that he can walk the walk. But alas, this was a time where the show was testing waters and displaying the aspirations one had for the food world, so the opportunities to show their food on display were fairly limited to make way for other aspects. As for the Irish lad with the singular episode arc, what more can I say? He's just Ken.